Mr. President. Happy New Year to you. My name is Bernard Avele. I work at City FM. My question is that Ghana is known to be a net importer of crude, so that when world prices go up, we suffer. When world prices come down, we benefit. The prices of crude on the world market have remained at a very interesting low for a long time, and yet the New Year gift we got was an average of 33% increase in prices at the pump. Explanation some of your ministers have given us is that we need the money to build roads and to solve Dumso. But in December, we got over 50% increase in tariffs that we're already paying. There's also a new income tax law, which we were hit with in January. So it's a 3-in-1 in January. Some people feel that your government is punishing we the citizens, squeezing everything out of us, whereas you're not able to retrieve monies. For example, the women money has not come 2 or 3 years after that. So how do you convince us that you care for us with these specific policies? Thank you.
Happy New Year, Mr. President. My name is Fifi Banson from Kasapara FM.
Okay, how are you?
I'm a bit worried, first of all, about 2 things. First of all, one of the major problems America is fighting right now is about the issue of guns in the system. As Commander-in-Chief, are you worried about the way guns are parading everywhere? You find people walking around with guns, you find people carrying guns. We all know the story that happened in Kumasi recently, with very, very sophisticated ammunitions. Are you worried about that in an election year particularly? And then secondly, we've heard all these about incompetent government, corruption. It's become like a cliche now in our body politics. On a scale of 0 to 10 in your administration, how will you rate yourself in terms of the fight against corruption? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, and Happy New Year. My name is Moro Audu. I'm a freelance journalist. His Excellency, I can understand let me put it this way. The party upon which he rode to presidency, which is the NDC, is about to chalk 8 years in power. We have a very interesting scenario where you will now be finishing your first term. We've heard your critics say that the NDC has done it 8 years, so Obi Nkona, Obi Sombra. How do you intend to cross this hurdle of convincing Ghanaians that yes, NDC has done 8 years, but I have done only 1 term, and so give me another term, also bearing in mind that that would mean that the NDC as a party in government would have done 3 terms. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, Afishaba. My name is Kojo Yankson. I'm the host of the Super Morning Show on Joy. Let me just take the opportunity to commend you on this rather fresh and brave method of communicating with the media. Your Excellency, I want to read something that you said in December 2013. You said, I've instructed the Ministry of Justice and Attorney General, Iyoko, and Ministry of Finance to work with the Ministry of, actually I'm not sure which ministry this is, to achieve the following by the end of the year. 1, secure the refund of monies wrongfully paid to or appropriated by any individual or company on contracts with SADA, JIDA, and the GRA. And then you also said that they should initiate legal action against individuals or companies to secure these refunds and or to punish them for any wrongdoing established. This was an instruction that you gave more than 2 years ago. So far, only 14.5 million has been retrieved from one of the many agencies that you mentioned involved in these corruption scandals. These are not the only instructions you've given. You instructed the Attorney General to go about retrieving the money from Woyome. In fact, even a non-corruption related one, you instructed that state institutions should buy made-in-Ghana furniture. None of these things have been done. Your Excellency, I'm wondering, why are your people not doing what you tell them? Thank you.
Net importer of crude. We import petroleum products. We currently are not importing crude because the Tema oil refinery has been down. But then we also gain revenue from exports of crude oil as a result of the share that we have in Jubilee with the Tallow partners. Now, increasingly, when the price went up to about 93, revenue from crude oil was becoming a very significant part of our budget. With the drop from above 90 to about 32 currently, or 33, we have lost billions of cedis into the national treasury. But at the same time, it has reduced the price of petroleum products on the market. And government took a decision in July last year to deregulate the price of petroleum products. And so, with the fall in the price of light crude, there has been an accompanying reduction in crude oil price, in petroleum product prices since July last year. Now, what has happened is, from the time that we started a deregulation, and the last increase in transport fares, price of petroleum products have gone down by more than 37%. And so, even with the introduction of the levies, the energy levy, at an average of about between 26 and 27%, we still are below the deregulation point by almost 11%. And so we've not gotten to where prices were even before. Now, let's take the energy levy. Utilities have accumulated debts over the last almost 15 to 20 years. And as a result of this accumulation of debt, it has choked the credit lines of the utility companies to an extent that VRA today cannot go to any bank and establish an LC, because I think they owe virtually every bank in Ghana. As the line got choked here, they went and opened a new account in another bank. And then they'll take the credit until it gets choked. Then they open a new account with another bank. So now no bank, any bank they go to say, hey, anymore. You know. Now, if we want a sustainable power sector, we have to deal with that debt. You must deal with that debt. And how are we going to deal with that debt? I don't have that money. If I had, I would pay on behalf of VRA. And so we need to take that money from somewhere. And so the point is, at the time when God has blessed us to have the price go down 37%, it was still even 11% lower. We take a little money and say, look, let's all contribute and pay off this debt, because we all use that power that VRA generated. I don't see what really we have done wrong. Aside from that, a portion of the debt, a portion of the levy is going to go to the road fund to pay arrears to contractors and also invest in the road sector. Happily today, more than 90%, as a result of my indigenization policy, I have harangued the road ministry. More than 90% of contractors working in our road sector are Ghanaian, our own people. And so if that money goes to them, they are going to invest it in building roads. And when they are building the roads, what will happen? It will lead to employment. Masons, steel benders, cement sellers, carpenters, truck operators, excavator operators, bulldozer operators will find jobs. And so it's a reinvestment in our own economy. That money is not going outside. It is being reinvested in our own economy. It's going to our road contractors. And our road contractors are going to invest it here. And if they make a profit, they're going to invest that profit here in Ghana. And so it's just like recycling our own money. And so I think that that is an investment rather than to say you're overtaxing the people or something like that. Because the thing about government investment and expenditure is the money doesn't come from anywhere. It comes from ourselves. And especially you have a country where the number of people who know that they must pay a tax on income do not exceed 30% of the population. Almost 70% of the population pay only indirect taxes. And so you either have to go and knock the shop and take a daily rate. And at the end of the year, we're all supposed to go and file our taxes and declare our incomes. And you say, okay, you pay 1,000 Ghana, you pay 500, you pay this. 70% or more of our people don't file their tax returns. And so the only way you can raise money, really, is through the tax system. And the only way you can get everybody to contribute is through indirect taxes. And indirect taxes include like consumption of petroleum products. And so those who consume more, if you have a V8 and you buy more petrol, then you're paying more tax. If you sit in a trotro, you're paying less tax because 15 of you are in the trotro using the same fuel. And so those are some of the things that we're faced with. It's not every decision that would be popular. But what was I elected for as president? To take popular decisions? If I took popular decisions to make you happy with me, this country would be in the ground by now. They're tough decisions. I mean, do I take pleasure in imposing taxes on people as if, you just take a pleasure in doing it? You don't. But you look at the alternative, and the alternative is worse. And so you must take decisions that are in the national interest. The benefits might not be seen immediately, but then in future people will see what benefits they have accrued from the decisions that were made. And so despite the 27% increase in the price, we're still 11% lower than we were when we started deregulation. And in any case, for the vulnerable in society, transport fares have not gone up. So actually the increase is hitting us, the users of private vehicles. And for most of us, I mean, if you're able to drive your own private vehicle alone to work and back, then you show that you have, an income that, you can contribute a little more than the person who sits in a trotro. And so that's the issue with. The other side is the tax laws that were passed. There were two laws taxes that were proposed, but it was noticed and a letter had already gone to the speaker stopping them. One was the 1% tax on profits from treasury bills, income from treasury bills. A letter had gone to the speaker, asking for an amendment of that particular tax. The other one was the increase in tax on services, withholding tax on services to 15%. A letter had already gone reducing that to 7.5%. So I think that issue you talked about, has been dealt with in respect of those particular taxes that people complained about. It had been noticed and a letter had been sent even before the outcry began with regards to that. Guns in the system. Yes, we all must be worried about guns in the system. And so from the time I became president, we have not been issuing licenses for importation of guns and bullets. And so if you notice, there is probably a shortage of bullets, and that's why there was that attempt to bring in a huge consignment of bullets that was arrested at Aflao recently. Because the thing is, when you have more small arms and weapons in the system, then it falls into wrong hands and people are able to use it to do things that you are untoward, and you normally create a more violent society. And so we are doing everything possible to ensure that people don't have access to these weapons and to, as much as possible, reduce the amount of weapons in the system. And the police are doing well. Like I told you, they did that bust, major bust at the Kumasi place, and then also the customs and immigration to made the bust of the many weapons, bullets that were found. And so a lot of work is going on to try and resolve that. With regards to corruption, corruption does not wear political face. Corruption is about systems and strength of institutions. Government is a continuum, and all of us must contribute our quota to the fight against corruption. We have institutional weaknesses, and traditionally what has happened in the past is that accountability is exacted when one government has gone out of power and a new government comes into power. Then it starts investigating the government that has gone out of power. But while the government is in power and issues are happening with corruption, traditionally they have not been investigated. This is the first government, and I made a pledge that any issues of corruption brought to my attention, I will have them investigated and dealt with. But you cannot be an adherent of constitutional democracy and be an admirer of arbitrary justice. There is due process. I was speaking to one of my colleague heads of state, and he said something very instructive. He said, when I was a military ruler, I just arrested the people, and they were guilty until they proved themselves innocent. He said, but today as a civilian ruler, one, I can't arrest them, but even when I arrest them, they are innocent until I prove them guilty. That is democracy. We can't eat our cake and have it. As I'm speaking today, the Attorney General has been served. Somebody has filed a writ at the Supreme Court to say that the judgment, she had no jurisdiction, the court had no jurisdiction for that judgment they gave in the Woyome case. If we did not have the Constitution and I was head of the military government, I'd have gone and grabbed the guy and locked him up until he's proved innocent. But you must go by due process. You must follow the law. Just this morning, they were going to issue the FIFE on Woyome, and then this writ was served on the Attorney General. So what should we do? The last I checked, the Attorney General has retrieved in excess of 50 million Ghana cedis from those I instructed money to be retrieved from. The JIDA case particularly, in the service contracts that they signed, they said they were taking loans to do the training. But JIDA as an institution is not mandated to give loans, so those loans were illegal. And that's why I said the loans should be retrieved, because if they were loans, then you must pay back. And she's collected in excess of 50 million. So far, from corruption cases that have occurred, we've retrieved more than 70 million Ghana cedis of the people's money. And so while you're doing that, some are paying, some are going to court and saying that you have no right to take the money from them. And you cannot, use revolutionary justice on them. You have to go through the route, the legal route. And this is an Attorney General who is doing so well to protect the public purse. And so this government has the will to investigate corruption and is actually investigating and punishing corruption. We sacked 163 national service coordinators, fired them because of corruption. 35 of them are before court as I speak. We recovered almost 20 million Ghana cedis from them for money that they had misappropriated. But the unfortunate thing in this country is when you show the will to investigate corruption, then your opponent takes it as evidence and say, you see, this proves that this government is corrupt. But it's not like it didn't exist. It has existed. From the investigation we did about the National Service, it started before I came into office. And so it's a risk a president must take in the fight against corruption. And the thing is, corruption is measured mostly by perception. And sometimes perception is bigger than reality. So when you have a country that has a free and vibrant media, that has good self-expression, the perception of corruption is normally higher because we are free to speak about it. If you're in a country where you don't have media, you can't talk freely, they normally would have a lower perception of corruption because they cannot speak freely about it. And Ghana has the highest media per capita in Africa, if not in the world. If they shared radio stations amongst us, we all have a higher per capita. We have almost 300 FM stations, in a country of our land size. If you compare that with any other country, we have the highest media per capita. And it's a good thing. Because the media must continue to be the mouthpiece in which we fight against social ills. And corruption is one of those social ills. But the point also is that you don't only wait for corruption to happen to sanction it. You must put in place the instruments that prevent people from being corrupt. And that's one of the things this government has been doing. We're implementing the gift mix program, public financial management program, so that it takes away human discretion in terms of manual invoices and all that. And so if you have your budget and you have to draw money, you must have the code, you must have the details, you must fill it into the gift mix and apply for release of the money to pay for this and that. So we can always check and see who inputted that particular information. And so we're doing that. We're using technology to try and remove a lot of things. I spoke to the governor of the Bank of Ghana and I said we must work for a cashless society. We carry too much cash in this country. If you go to Kenya, they use mobile phones to pay for goods. You go to the local supermarket, you ship up your mobile phone and you pay for your goods. We carry a wad of money in our pocket to go to the supermarket. If I'm driving my car and a policeman stops me, you pass through red light, and I have a debit card, can I pay him a bribe? If he asks for a bribe, I'll say, bring your point of sale device. So we must work to reduce the amount of cash we carry in this country. And we must put the systems in place that make it difficult for people to demand bribes from us or accept bribes from us. And it's not a political issue. When we use it for politics, then we actually take away our attention from the work that needs to be done to be able to check corruption. And so that's why I say I won't play the blame game. I'm president, of this country, elected. It's my duty to continue the fight against corruption. And we'll do it. We'll continue to do it. There are other investigations that we're doing. And I haven't stopped any investigation. The agencies come to me and say, we're initiating an investigation into this. And I say, okay, go ahead. And they do. A whistleblower raised issues of corruption in NHIS. At a time, several months ago, about 6 to 8 months ago, because the hospital facilities had said they won't provide service to NHIS cardholders because the scheme owes them. And a whistleblower came and said, oh, these facilities, they are just ripping you off. A lot of the claims they forward are false. And he gave evidence. And so BNI initiated an investigation and told me they've initiated an investigation into NHIS. And that investigation is ongoing. I haven't attempted to interfere in the investigation or anything. There's another investigation they are also working on. There are several. It's not like these things haven't existed. They exist. And we see it and all of us keep quiet. But it's a duty of the president, if it comes to my attention, to have the right investigative organization to go into it and find out if there's wrongdoing. And if there's wrongdoing, to go ahead and punish that wrongdoing. And that's what I'm doing. With regards to competence, it depends on what your criteria for competence, is. And I don't like to rate myself. I think that the people of Ghana will be the ones to rate me by the performance of my leadership. And I think that competence encompasses a lot of things. It encompasses the ability to lead with a warm heart, to be tolerant of dissent. It's all competence. To be able to bring people together. But like I said, I'll leave it there. The right judges of a person's competence are the good people of Ghana. And on 7th November, they will judge my competence. That's all I'm saying. I think that in the next question, I will just say that we operate with the Constitution of Ghana. And the Constitution of Ghana prescribes the terms and conditions under which one can be president and what one can do in respect of the term of office of president. And the Constitution of Ghana speaks about president. It doesn't talk about party. And it says that the president shall be eligible to 2 terms in office, to re-election, if he is re-elected. And so it's for the Ghanaian people. I'm offering myself. My party has endorsed me. And I'm going to the Ghanaian people and saying, give me a second term. I've not done 8 years. I've done 3 years. That's why I'm doing this press conference. And this is my first term in office. And so the Constitution says I can go back to the Ghanaian people and stand for re-election. And that's what I'm going to do. And so let's leave it to the judgment of the Ghanaian people. I think that in answering the issue of corruption, I have virtually dealt with this issue of refund of monies. And so I'll leave it there. I know the Attorney General and Minister of Justice is working very seriously on this matter. And she will continue to work, to ensure that she retrieves any monies that anybody has taken. But let me draw your attention to something. Since I instituted the Judgment Debt Commission, and I gave specific instructions to the Attorney General, and I said, fight every judgment debt case. You'll be surprised. And I'm going to give you a number of cases listed here. And if you have the Accounting to the People, you can refer to it. It's on page 154. Since that time, the case of Sweater and Socks versus the Attorney General, the state had avoided the payment of $28.9 million as a result of the Attorney General fighting the case and refusing to pay. In the case of Angmote versus the Attorney General, the High Court, the state has set aside a judgment that was given asking the state to pay 99 million Ghana cedis. And so the Attorney General saved us 99 million Ghana cedis. She saved us $28.9 million. Then in the case of China Jinling International Economic and Technical Corporation, the state was saved 352 million Ghana cedis and $1.6 million in that case. Because finally the payment the state was made was limited to 100,000 Ghana cedis. That is what the court said we should pay the company. And the company was demanding 352 million Ghana cedis. In the case of Polmort Holdings versus the Ministry of Sports, the company was asking for $27 million The Attorney General defended it successfully, and we avoided the payment of that amount. In the case of AMI Africa Exploration versus the Attorney General, a claim for damages in excess of $1 million was avoided as a result of the defense. In case of Dunkwa Goldfields versus Government of Ghana, the state avoided the payment of $200 million that was being demanded. In the case of Rona Construction versus Area Wood Products Limited and Attorney General, the Attorney General got set aside a judgment debt of 3.5 million Ghana cedis. In the case of Rebecca Van Dyke versus the IGP and Attorney General, the Attorney General saved us 946,000 Ghana cedis. And then several others. In the case of Balkan Energy, Balkan demanded $200 million. Eventually, we ended up paying $12 million. And so, there are so many. There's still some Tigen LLC, so and so forth. All judgment debt cases, which, because of my instruction to the Attorney General, she has very successfully defended and saved Ghana, hundreds of millions of dollars in debts that we would have paid as a result of, judgment debts. And so it is a part of the fight against corruption, and I think that we are up to it and will continue to play our part.
Good afternoon, JDM. My name is Christian Besseson with The Insight. You expressed concern about the fact that our data systems don't speak to each other. And in this case, I'll go for our identification systems. And the only constitutionally mandated body in charge of our ID system is the National Identification Authority. Your Excellency, as we speak now, there is almost inactivity at the NIA. What is your commitment towards resourcing the NIA to function properly? Thank you.
Your Excellency, Happy New Year. The name is Raymond Kofi, Government Porter. I have benefited from the changing lives because today is the first time of having the opportunity to interact with you. Sir, you talked about corruption. Most of the times, politicians are attacked with corruption. But there are a lot of civil servants who are killing this country. Let me give you an example. People are transferred and their haulage, sometimes, probably the person has been transferred, he has to be paid about 1,000, which is 10 million OCDs. They will delay the payment of the transfer grant for about 3-4 years because people want to get their share. So they want to wait till the money increases. These are some of the ways some of these civil servants are killing us. Now, politicians are fallen victims to some of these things. A case in point is our own Madam Jifa Ativo. He's one minister whose resignation has hit me. And I want to know from you what you are going to do to the budget officer, procurement officer, the chief director, who helped in this situation. The minister has resigned, and these people, we haven't heard anything about them. So, sir, the transfer grant, I have fallen victim to it. I was transferred here 3 years ago, up to now, less than 1,600 point something, less than 17 million OCDs. For 3 years, my transfer grant hasn't been paid. I went to check the document, they can't find the document at all. So, sir, how do we address the issue of some of these civil servants who are killing us? Thank you.
I am Emefa Apau from class 91.3. I would like to seek further clarification on the Gitmo detainees issue. You stated that extensive consultation went into it, in fact, about a year prior to the taking of that decision. I'd like to find out if Parliament was involved in the taking of that decision, that consultation process, because we've had the Ghana Bishops Conference, we have the Christian Council of Ghana, quite a number of civil society groups bringing us statements on why they were not consulted in such an important decision process. You also stated that your faith and compassion as a Christian also played a role. I would like to find out, where lies that faith and that compassion? We've had some Ghanaians also, probably with less offenses. They've not been tried, they've not been convicted, they are in our prisons. I'm sure also begging for that same faith and Christian compassion you have, Mr. President. Thank you.
Mr. President, Happy New Year.
Thank you.
I guess you've had enough Happy New Years to win in the elections. Anyway, my name is Eko Moses. I report for Bloomberg News. We are running an IMF program, and from all intents and purposes, it is an austere one. Then you have a growth target and a deficit target of 5.4 and 5.3 respectively. But given what is happening to the crude oil price, the slowdown of China, the second biggest economy, and then the rise in interest hikes in the US, what does that portend for us? And by extension, what is the greatest threats that you face in achieving these economic targets in an election year? Thank you.
If you listen to the budget this year, the Minister of Finance announced that this year we're going to implement an IPRS system. That's an integrated population registration system. What it means is that we're going to go forward with the registration of our citizens. These things all work in tandem, and that's why we also are looking at the other side of it. I gave instructions that streets be named, and I'm sure that if you go around today, you'll find that most of our street naming has been done. I didn't know the name of my street till, the street naming was done, and I saw, what is it called? Prestige Drive. I don't know who formulates those names. Some of them are very creative, Konkonte Street, and, so I live on Prestige Drive, I think number 5 or something. It's important to know where our population resides. It's important to know who our citizens are, who are foreigners living with us, and all that. And so the minister has announced that we'll go ahead with an IPRS system this year. At the same time, we also are starting a new system of births and deaths, using community health volunteers and assemblymen, and using a simple mobile platform so that anybody who has a birth or death in the community can use the mobile phone to register name of father. There'll be a format that they can put name of mother, name of child, date born, time, everything will be put in there. And that information will go to the district births and deaths registry. It will be entered into the district births and deaths registry, and at the same time be captured in the national births and deaths registry. So that in future, when a child has grown and wants their birth certificate, they just go and they go into the data system and pull out the information and print the birth and deaths, the birth certificate for whoever it is. I think that the two go hand in hand, the birth registration system and the IPRS. And the Minister of Finance has announced that this year we will commence the two systems. And once he's announced it in the budget, then it means that resources will be made available. And the authority that is responsible for that, of course, is the National Identification Authority. Once we have the IPRS system, then we will start the process of linking together all the other databases. And that is why we're building what we call the National Data Center. It is near the Parliament, very imposing building. It's getting all the servers and everything that is necessary to be able to store and back up all our national data. And so once we have the National Data Center, we will have a link to the IPRS system, and all the other institutions that issue cards would be able to link their databases into the IPRS. So that SNIT, NHIS, DVLA, and all of them, Ministry of Foreign Affairs that issue passports and all, will be able to link up with the data system so that these databases can talk to each other and be able to compare nodes, so that we don't have different organizations capturing our data and then issuing us with cards. Eventually, my eventual vision is that one day we should have a multi-purpose card that has your health insurance particulars on it. It has your driver's license particulars on it. It has your SNP, particulars on it, and every other information that you would need. And so we'll continue to work to do that. With the issue of corruption, yes, this has been said many times, and there's a certain, cynicism, or what would I call it, where he says politicians come and go, but the civil servants will remain until retirement. And it's true, because politicians focus on each other and want to beat each other with the stick of corruption, then you don't really trace, what is happening in the system. A lot of the negotiations and technical discussions on projects and things are done at the technical level. And often as minister, it will be brought to you to sign after the negotiations and technical discussions have taken place. So often you might find that it's not even the minister who negotiated the project or the program. And so eventually when it goes forward and something happens to it, because you are the leader and you take responsibility, then sometimes you have to do what is dignified by resigning, not because you are culpable, but because you take responsibility and that you should have ensured that that didn't happen. But like I said, sometimes the malfeasance is, a lot of the time the malfeasance is below the politician. And we all know what happens in places. You take your document, like you were saying, and they say you have to put some weight on it. If you don't put weight on it, it won't move. And so these are things that we know happen every day. And we must have the political will to expose it and deal with it. And so one of the initiatives I'm going to announce in the State of the Nation address is citizens' complaint centers, where a citizen can walk in and make a complaint about somebody who's either, taking a bribe from him or has abused his office in a certain way. And these citizens' complaint centers are going to be put at strategic places. We're going to employ national service people to sit there, and they will take your complaint. And we will take your phone number. The complaint will be investigated very quickly, and you will get a response, to what the complaint has been. It's one of the new initiatives my presidential staffers are working on. Clement Parkers, the chief driver. Clement, make sure it happens. So these citizen complaint centers will give our population the opportunity to be able to report these things so that action can be taken about it. And I believe that will be another step in bringing about good governance. With regards to prosecution or sanctioning other people, I think in the Attorney General's report, it indicated that we should look and see if any other people were culpable and they should be, government can go ahead to sanction them. There were defects in the procurement procedure. If you read the Attorney General's report, there were defects in the procurement procedure. The project involved respraying the buses. A lot of people think that it's just those stickers on the glass that were put on. The buses came in a dark orange color, and the justification that was given was to differentiate them from the City Express buses that work outside the urban centers, because these were being brought as urban and city buses. And so it was decided to respray them. So the buses were actually resprayed in 4 colors. And so I think what the Attorney General did was to contact some car companies and ask them and say, if you got this contract to respray these buses and put the labeling, advertising labeling on the windows, how much will you charge? And so they gave her a figure. And based on that figure and extrapolation, she determined that there was an excess payment, and the company has been asked to refund the excess payment. I know that, I think yesterday, on Friday, the lawyers of the company met with the Attorney General to agree on a phased payment, a payment plan to refund what has been described as the excess. And so the Attorney General will go ahead and take that. With regards to Gitmo, When I talked about consultations, I talked about consultations on the security level. I was not saying that we went and spoke to every pastor and every imam to ask whether we should bring the Guantanamo detainees. But we did extensive consultations at the security level to ensure that there was no danger to our safety and security. And those consultations were external, they were internal, and that's what I was referring to. This is a matter of security. It's not an international treaty, and so it's not something that we were required to take to Parliament, and that is why it didn't go to Parliament. But I said, as Commander-in-Chief, I mean, I stand to lose the most if I jeopardize the security of this nation. And so we did a lot of work with our partners, and I believe that the collaboration that we're having with our international partners is positive. I cannot disclose everything, but we have got very good intelligence information. And the risk to you is even worse than these. It's worse than these detainees, because you must be interested in what your children are doing. Your children are probably being radicalized. One day before you see your son has set off to go and fight in Syria. And we've seen a few examples where young, promising people have left home. And even though we haven't confirmed it, their behavior falls into a certain pattern that shows that they probably have been radicalized. And we don't have the network to be able to trace where they are. And so America and countries like that, we have submitted the names, and they're helping us to locate where these people are and be able to tell what they are involved in, so that when they're coming back home, we can find out, where have you been, what have you done. And so these are some of the things that we're working on. There's a story of a Ghanaian girl in Denmark, a girl born to Ghanaian parents in Denmark. She just got up one day and off to Syria. Went and had a child in Syria or something, returned to Denmark, was going to Syria again, and then she was stopped. So the threat goes beyond just 2 detainees who were arrested when they were 20 years old, and who it's been certified were not involved in any operational activity and have been certified to be low risk, who want to restart their lives. And I hear GBC had the opportunity to interview them, and they said they were cheering for Ghana in 2010 when we beat America, and that their favorite, I was told that they said their favorite player is Asamoah Gyan or something like that. Of course, Asamoah Gyan played in UAE for a long time, so I'm sure that definitely he'll be their most admired player. Where is my Christian compassion with prisoners? I'm the first president in this country to go to the prison and visit the prisons. I went to the prison, I saw myself the conditions in which these prisoners live. And on the basis of that, and I went with the Chief Justice and the Attorney General on that day, and some of the justices of the court. And on the basis of that, we have set up a court in the prison as I speak that is reviewing the case of remand prisoners. That is reviewing the case of remand prisoners and letting them go, if the state is not ready to charge them. And so a lot of prisoners who have been on remand for so many years are being taken out of prison. That's my Christian compassion for prisoners. And I also said that we must build a new remand prison, because the current remand prison the prisons are congested, and so remand offenders are not supposed to be in the same cells as convicts. And yet, because of congestion, the remand cell contains convicted prisoners too. And so in this year, we are budgeting to build a new remand prison, a new remand cell block in Nsawam prison, so that we can move the remand prisoners in there and then decongest the other prisons. Indeed, each of us must pay a visit to the prisons. I mean, it's not a condition in which human beings should live. These prisons were built years ago, and they were not built as a friendly environment for any person who went in there. It was really meant to punish you. But even then, at the time, the prisoners were few, 2 or 3 to a room. Now you go to a room, the bigger cells, and they contain about 16 prisoners. A cell that was made to contain not more than 4 people. And so it's something we need to work on urgently. And as I said, prison is there for everybody. You don't know. You don't know what you do and end up there. And so there's always been an advice to leaders that, of course, in the cool period, that you should make sure that the prison is kept in a good state, so that if you land there inadvertently, it won't be as bad as it should be. But after my visit to the prison, I went with the chairman of the prison council, Reverend Wengam, and he was launching that very good Efiasi project to try and get the private sector to assist and see how we can improve conditions in the prisons. It was an eye-opener for me, and I have committed that I will do everything possible to make the condition in our prisons much better. The first thing is to build the new remand cell so that we can decongest the remand prison and not mix, remand prisoners with convicted prisoners. After that, we'll look at other things that we can do. We must also look at the welfare of the prison officers. And so I've asked the Minister of Finance to look for some money so that we can provide them with logistics and vehicles and other things that they need to be able to do their work. We're doing an IMF program that requires us to be austere. And what I've always said about the national economy is it's like your family budget. If you have a family budget and every year your expenditure exceeds your income, then you need to do something about it. Otherwise, you get in debt and you end up in a sawam. So, if you earn 5,000 Ghana cedis and every month you spend 7,000 or 8,000 Ghana cedis, that difference must come from somewhere. Otherwise, you will keep either going to borrow, and it's unsustainable because you can't pay. So, for ourselves as a nation, our deficits had gone up to almost 12%. It was 11 point something percent. And we came up with a homegrown program to be able to rein it in. But there was a lot of skepticism about whether we could implement the homegrown program ourselves. And I said, we can do it. But, the investors and the international partners and everything, at this time they had stopped all, disbursement of international donor support, and Bloomberg and Reuters and everybody, the Ghanaian economy is crashing, this is happening. And once you get that kind of bad press, it affects your credit rating. So Moody's will come, downgrade that, Fitch will come, downgrade us. All the credit rating agencies were downgrading us. So, in your poor corner of Africa, you are not a Nigeria that is like an elephant that can resist IMF and say, oh, come on, we go away. For policy credibility, I said, look, let's go to the IMF and let's, implement this financial program. And so we sent the homegrown program to the IMF, and the same things that we had said we would do is the same things they said we should do. I don't see any significant addition at all that was made to the homegrown. There was nothing. The only thing was to reduce central bank financing, to zero by this year. Otherwise, the same conditions were what we did. And what we did was we front-loaded the tougher measures. And so those tougher measures we took last year. And so this year, there are some austerity measures that we're taking, but these are to do with zero central bank financing. It means that if we have liquidity problems, we cannot go and take money from the central bank. Because really, when you go take money from the central bank, it's like printing money and putting it in the economy. And what it does is it increases money supply, and it makes it difficult for inflation to come down, and it puts pressure on the cedi. Because once there's excess liquidity in the system, then what people do is they use the cedi to hedge, the dollar to hedge against the cedi. And so if you have excess money, instead of putting it in the bank, you go and buy dollars and put it under your bed or put it in your dollar bank account in anticipation that if the CD slides, at least your dollar will maintain its value. And so one of the things we had to do was to do financial tightening so that we mop up excess liquidity in the system. And I believe that for now, we have done quite well in terms of money supply, bringing money supply to the right level. And so we're on track. We haven't yet come out with the new numbers for last year because the Ministry of Finance is still compiling. But we brought it from 11.3%. We came down to 9.3% the year before. And this year is looking good. We're asked to come to 7.3%, but it's likely that we might do better than 7.3%. At the appropriate time, the Ministry of Finance will announce the numbers. And then this year, we're supposed to bring it from 7.3% to 5.5% or thereabouts, 5.4%. And so it's good for us, because the deficit is it's deficit to GDP. So it's how much your income exceeds, how much your expenditure exceeds your income as a percentage of your GDP. And it can't be good that a country is running a huge deficit. And so we're doing everything possible to bring the deficit down, because when the deficit comes down and the economy is breathing easier, then at the same time it brings down inflation rate. And when inflation rate comes down, then interest rates also follow. But like he's saying, if you look at the international dynamics, this is going to be a difficult year, not only for Ghana, for most countries. Like he said, China's slowdown means that China is importing less raw material, and that is part of what is affecting the price of crude oil on the international market. Because at a time where there are excess inventories of crude oil, China is consuming less than it normally would have consumed. And then there's all this price war between shale producers and OPEC producers. And then now there's this conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Iran is prepared to pump more oil onto the market. I mean, it's a very unpredictable situation. And so it affects all of us. It's not only Ghana. If you go to South Africa, you go to many other countries, the economic situation is quite unpredictable. And that is why we must rely on ourselves more. And that is the very reason that justifies even this economic levy, because it's income that we are raising from within ourselves. We're not bringing from outside. And so that's the reason why with the uncertain economic decision, we must learn to rely on ourselves. And so if all of us sacrifice a little more to the energy levy to sustain our power utilities, we contribute a little more so that we can pay our road contractors to be able to keep people in employment, I think it's something that we should be willing to look at. And so with all these uncertainties, in the world, oil prices are down. It's cocoa that is still sustaining us with a good price. And that is also because of climate change. Climate change is affecting the inventories of cocoa. And so nobody is sure, how much cocoa will be available. And so there's a bit of speculation there, so cocoa price remains high. Our next major export is gold. And gold has been down for a long time. It's even gone below the 1,200 mark. It's about $1,060 per fine ounce now. And so it means that the things that have traditionally bolstered the economy are not looking very certain. And so we must pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. And the good thing is, revenue is doing better, so that we can continue to provide the social services to the people. And that is what is being called overtaxing. But if you even look at it, for the status at which we are as a lower middle income country, our level of taxes, is it taxes to GDP or taxes to revenue, should be at 22%. Currently, Ghana is at between 17 and 18%. So if you compare us to an economy like Kenya, Kenya is extracting more revenue in terms of taxes than we are, because we are 18, Kenya is 22. And if you compare us to the countries that should be in the same bracket as us, we are performing lower than they are doing. But like I said, there's room for improving the collection of taxes. And so we will be very careful that we're not imposing more new taxes, but what we're doing is we're improving efficiency so that more people are caught into the tax net and are able to contribute their quota for the progress of our country. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, and Happy New Year to you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Earlier, you mentioned that you alluded to the fact that your gray hair is increasing. And I think it's the otherness about you this afternoon. I want to know from you, since your assumption of office, what you have done to reduce pressure on you, on the presidency. Because if any prominent person dies in this country, they call on the president. A business delegation calls on the president. Anything at all the president is referred to. What have you done to reduce the pressure on yourself to concentrate on the things that you find very important to you? And what keeps you awake at night? Thank you.
My name is Bridget Otu. I work with TV3. I want to go back to the detainees. It looks like it's a topical issue now. And the Christian Council and other Christian groups have been very emphatic, demanding that they are sent back. You've explained, indeed, that Ghana stands to benefit a lot. Would you, or have you considered sending them back? Or at what point would you consider it critical to do so? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. I am Ojon Amens. I report for Radio SYZ. Mr. President, I would like to know the position of Ghana on gay rights. And because many religious leaders have kicked against it, but lawyers are divided on the practice.
Mr. President, thank you very much. My name is Evans Mensah with Joy FM. I just have a quick follow-up on a question on JIDA. Last year on the 9th of December, you said that, quote, the Attorney General Nyoko should recover the outstanding of 40.5 million. I'm just asking, today is 11th of January. Has that been recovered?
Happy New Year, Excellency, Mr. President. My name is Samuel Ablodepe. I report for Radio Gold. With regards to corruption, I have observed in your administration that there's a lot of sole sourcing instead of tender by the MDAs, that is the ministries, departments, and agencies. What are you doing to deal with sole sourcing in your administration? And secondly, what are you doing to retool the security agencies to ensure that they safeguard the peace and unity we are enjoying now, even before, during, and after the 2016 elections? Thank you.
Pressure on the presidency. Yes, you're right. We run an executive presidency, and often in an executive presidency, there's more pressure on the person who occupies the position. But the Constitution gives you the vice president to assist you. And then you also have ministers of state in the presidency. You have presidential staffers. You even have your chief of staff. And so what I've done to reduce pressure is to make sure that I'm delegating some of these things. Ghanaians are normally not happy. They want to see the president himself. They're trying to announce the death of a big paramount chief. They want the president to be the one to represent them. So what happens is when I'm available, I do my best within the time that I have to see if I can, shoulder some of that responsibility. But when it's really impossible, then I make sure the vice president, represents me, or the chief of staff. I'm sure that lately the chief of staff has received several delegations, informing them us about the passing away of somebody. It's our tradition. You cannot run away from it. And so we continue to do that. But like I said, delegating more, to other officials in the presidency helps to reduce the pressure and then make you concentrate on some of the other things that you should be paying attention to. What keeps me awake at night? I hardly sleep, so I don't know what keeps me awake. If you ask my ministers, sometimes they wake up in the morning and I have called somebody at 2 a.m. and they either come to the house in the morning and they say, oh, this minister is here. When he come down, oh, what is it? He says, my friend, call me at 2 a.m. I said, oh yeah, I wanted to talk to you about something, and I probably would have forgotten what it was I wanted to talk to him about. But if I do remember, then I tell the minister, pay attention to this or pay attention to that. But God blessed me with sleep. I'm a good sleeper. I don't sleep much. I sleep short hours. But when I fall on the bed, I go off like a light, ploop. And so I don't think that anything much. If anything keeps me awake, then it's just, how to make this country a better place, So in the night, sometimes you just lie and think about the things, the policies you're implementing, how you can, improve those policies so that they affect the people in a much better way and improve the quality of their lives. We will continue to engage with the religious groups. And I know yesterday the Minister of Foreign Affairs had quite a long session with the Christian Council. She's going to consult other groups and continue to explain, government's position. And it's my hope that, it will ignite, a certain sympathy, for these people so that we don't excessively continue to have issues with this particular matter. So that engagement with the Christian Council and the other groups will continue. And I'm sure that with the continued reassurance that we give, it will touch their divine, hearts to be able to give these people the opportunity to have a restart and put their lives back together. According to the agreement that was made, they are supposed to be with us for 2 years, and after 2 years they're free to go wherever they want to go. And so that's the current agreement we have. But they live in the national security compound, and they live with national security personnel, and national security personnel chaperone them and go wherever they want to go with them. And so I don't think that we have much to fear from them. I said what we have to be afraid of is those that we don't know, not this one that we know. And so it's my hope that things will go well. We have a constitution, and the constitution has elaborate provisions in the directive principles of state policy and human rights. I swore an oath to respect that constitution. And so the rights of Ghanaians that are written into that constitution are what I am obliged to respect and uphold. And so far I have been upholding, the pledge that I made. And so go into our constitution and read through the rights. And if you define rights there as gay rights, then I uphold them. But the rights that the people of Ghana gave me and asked me to uphold, I am upholding. In addition to that, you can take the other rights that we as countries of the world have accepted, and that is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And so all the rights there, I am enjoined as president of this country to uphold, and I will continue to do just that. With regards to recovery, I don't know what the figure is, but off the top of my head, from the last briefing the Attorney General gave me, she's holding more than 50 million Ghana cedis. But I'm sure that she will have the opportunity to update the media on who has paid what. But like I said, she should use all due process to continue to recover these monies. And so even if people go to court, she must go through the process, clear the way to continue to put pressure on them to pay back the monies. A lot has been said about sole sourcing. Our Procurement Act, which was passed by Parliament, recognized that there are circumstances in which sole sourcing is permitted, but it gives the parameters and the procedures that you must use to do the sole sourcing. And so a lot of people say sole sourcing is the reason for some of the corruption that we see. There's not been such a phenomenal increase in sole sourcing. It's about the same, throughout. If I have seen the last figures, in 2013, sole sourcing as a percentage of our procurement was at 1.1%. And in 2014, sole sourcing as a percentage of our procurement was 1.7%. So just about 1.7% of all government procurements are sole sourced. And they are sole sourced because sometimes a country gives you money. And when they give you money, they say that they want their contractor, the contractor from their country, to be the one to do it. They won't give you the money and say, go and tender, and the money is from, say, China, and then a US company comes and wins the tender. They don't agree to do that. And so in that circumstance, you have to sole source. There are situations where the particular procurement you want to do, a certain company owns the copyright. And so you cannot source another company to come and do that procurement with the copyright of the company that holds it. So under those circumstances, you are compelled to sole source. But like I said, if we follow the procedures properly and we also implement, the value for money issues, I think that it should be possible for us to continue to guard against, losing public money. There has been the issue of the gas processing plant and how it was procured. And so I've referred it to Pricewaterhouse to take a look at the whole value and give me advice on the value, because this Norwegian paper raised an objection and said that if we had bought it at this price, we would have got it at this price, but we're paying this price. It's the simple, when the experts do the analysis, we'll see it. But the simple explanation that comes to mind is, yes, if you go to a car company and you want to buy a new car, a Toyota Corolla, let's assume, they'll tell you it's $40,000. Kodo, you don't have $40,000, but you want the car. So you say, okay, if you give me the car on work and pay, how much will it cost me? You say, oh, work and pay, how many years? Say 5 years. You say, okay, $80,000. That is, I don't know how to simplify it more. If we had the money to buy the generators for 220 million, you add the auxiliaries and so on and so forth, we would have done that. But this was a circumstance in which we didn't have it, and we wanted the project on emergency fast-track basis. And so he says, okay, I can do it for you, and then you pay through the tariff that you give me, and the tariff goes to pay for the equipment, and after 5 years, you can take the equipment for $1. I don't know, but like I said, I've referred to Pricewaterhouse. They are the experts. They'll do the financial modeling, and when they do the financial modeling, we'll take a look at it, and we'll publish it so that it comes up as a matter of for Ghanaians to see, what the state of that particular plant is, so that if there are any remedial measures we can take, or if it serves as a guide for future negotiations, then we use that as a guide, because there are several other plants in the process that are coming. And until this Ameri thing is put to rest, I can't tell whether the financial modeling has been done properly. There's the GE Early Power, and the GE Early Power, it's supposed to come to cabinet. We won't own the plant till after 20 years. After 20 years, then we pay $1 and take the plant. So we need to look at the tariff and the cost and see whether it's acceptable or not acceptable. And so with the concern that has been raised, I'm sure that we will take these projects through more due diligence to ensure that we're getting value for money. But I do think that we have established processes. We have established processes for these things. It starts from the MDA level, where the technical negotiations take place. And then once they have finished, it goes to the Ministry of Finance. And the Ministry of Finance looks at the financing terms. And then once that has been finished, it comes to Cabinet. And then Cabinet looks at it. After Cabinet, it goes to the representatives of the people in Parliament, to their committee. and then from there it goes onto the floor of the House. At any point in this process, a red flag can be raised. I mean, if people are not satisfied with the particular project, it doesn't help when it has gone through the process and then come out, and then it's in the process of implementation. Then people within the process who had the opportunity to look at it now come back and raise issues that should have been raised at the time that it came through. And so that's what I'll say for now. And like I said, sole sourcing is a minuscule part of the procurement that we do. The last figure I saw was about 1.7% of total procurement. How are we resourcing the security agencies? And I think this is the final question. We are procuring some additional vehicles and instruments for them in preparation for the election. Normally, we provide in the budget for election security. And I think that in this budget, the Minister of Finance has made provision for election security. And so it will include, additional vehicles for them to make them mobile. It will include some route control equipment and other equipment that they need to be able to ensure that nothing goes out of hand, before, during, and after the election. And so I'm sure that things would go well. I believe that Ghana continues to be the beacon of democracy in Africa, and that we've done 6 elections. This is going to be our 7th, and I believe that like the earlier 6 elections we have conducted, we're going to come out of it, in a major, secure, and peaceful manner. So that brings me to the end of the questions I answered. My brothers and sisters, this has indeed been an interesting and productive interaction, and I want to thank you for your very candid and frank questions. I've answered them honestly, transparently, and most importantly, with the hope that rather than my responses being an end of the subject full stop, they will be part of an ongoing discussion between the good people of Ghana, the media, members of my administration, and me. As with any conversation, in order to gain new and useful insights, it is important that we listen to one another, truly listen. What I've seen happening too often in our discourse is people dismissing the viewpoints of others without even listening to what it is they have to say. If we continue on this path, we run the risk of creating unnecessary divisions in our country, socially, ethnically, tribally, geographically, politically, and even in the arena of religion and faith. And what we sometimes fail to hear is that we are all on the same side. We are all on the side of Ghana. We may have differing opinions on how to get Ghana to the place where we want it to be, but the fact remains that we all do want to reach the same destination, one in which Ghana is fully developed with a thriving economy, ample employment opportunities, a solid infrastructure, top-level educational system that is accessible and free to all, a functional health delivery system, an overall reduction in poverty, and so much more. But that doesn't happen overnight. 3 years ago, when I was sworn in for my first term as president, the problems that Ghana was facing, while not insurmountable, were quite foundational. The power crisis is a prime example. The process of load shedding did not begin with my administration. The problems in our infrastructure have been apparent for quite some time. However, when confronted with the dilemma of how to resolve the problem, I opted not to go the route of a quick fix, because we as a nation cannot continue to make decisions for the short term. True progress must be sustainable. What we needed was a stable foundation and not a patch-up job, and that takes time. The decision I took to fully expand our energy infrastructure was not politically expedient or desirable. Indeed, the decision was quite unpopular. But leadership and popularity are not the same thing. And every so often in the course of leadership, one has to make decisions that are neither popular nor politically expedient. Such was the case during the 2014 Ebola outbreak in West Africa. As president, I took the decision to allow Ghana, specifically our capital city Accra, to serve as the base of operations for the United Nations and other relief organizations and efforts for the affected nations. There was anger and outrage and accusations that I was exposing our country to Ebola, that because of my decision, the virus would surely find its way across our borders and result in the loss of Ghanaian lives. But the alternative, to turn our back on our neighboring nations in their time of need, especially as the world was taking its time to respond, would have not only been insensitive, it would also have been inhumane. Having Accra to be the command post for humanitarian help during the Ebola crisis was not a popular decision, but I still maintain today that it was the right thing to do. Much in the same vein, my administration's decision to permit entry to 2 former Guantanamo Bay detainees, as well as some refugees from Rwanda, Syria, have been met with fierce resistance. I realize that our world is going through uncertain times. I realize too that no nation wants to open its door to terrorism. Still, we cannot let the fear of what might be cloud our compassion to make us turn a blind eye to the very real need that exists in our today's world. There are people who no longer have a country to call home. People who have been cleared of charges of all alleged crimes, and people whose only crime is being born in a country whose name is now automatically associated with a group of insurgents terrorizing their fellow countrymen and women. My brothers and sisters, Ghana has had a long history of humanitarianism. We've had a long history of being counted as a leader, not only on the African continent, but also in the entire international community. In 1960, Ghana became the first African nation to contribute troops to a UN peacekeeping force. At the time, peacekeeping was not fashionable, and many feared the dangers of inserting their troops into a war situation. In 1961, Ghana became the first nation ever to receive volunteers from the newly established Peace Corps. Throughout the years, Ghana has provided shelter for many freedom fighters and exiles. Long before the world's nations collectively declared the system of apartheid an abomination, Ghana was issuing passports and a place to call home to those who were fleeing the racial injustice and persecution taking place in South Africa. People such as Mariam Makiba and Hugh Masekela enjoyed this protection. When Nigeria considered musician Fela Kuti a criminal and a troublemaker of the highest order, Ghana offered him a home. During the 2 decades that civil war engulfed our sub-region, we accepted thousands of refugees from Togo, from Liberia, from Cote d'Ivoire, and at the time, for many Ghanaians, it was a point of contention. They believed it would make us too vulnerable, that it might somehow move the war onto our soil. And though it was not popular, the various administrations back then made the decision to grant refuge to those individuals because it was the right thing to do. Ghana has even gone so far as to offer Africans in the diaspora, as a result of the transatlantic slave trade, the ability to gain citizenship and live permanently on our soil as a result of the passage of the Right to Abode law passed by our parliament. Ladies and gentlemen, fear is a powerful motivator. That's the purpose of terrorism. It tests our commitment to who we are, our very principles, and it tests our ability to stay true to our own history. Ghana is our homeland, but we can never allow ourselves to forget that we're also citizens of a larger world, one that depends on the coexistence and cooperation of all nations in order to achieve true peace and stability. Nelson Mandela once said, and I quote, "Our human compassion binds us as the one to the other, not in pity or patronizingly, but as human beings who have learned how to turn our common suffering into a hope for the future." Quotations closed. And there are many reasons for us here in Ghana to have hope for the future. There are reasons why we can hope that the future of our country is bright. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your support. I want to thank you for your kind attention and your willingness to listen. And I end by saying, may God bless you, and may God continue to bless our beloved homeland, Ghana.